Howdy do! Today I'm going to give you a foolproof method for completing NaNoWriMo if your schedule is full of work and other obligations. The only thing I assume here is that you plan to carve out 2 hours a day, every day, in November? If you're too busy to set apart 2 hours, then just like Mother Teresa said, you're too busy. November is a time for fasting from the media, TV and social media in particular. If you already avoid these things, consider waking up early to write. And if you're truly too busy to find open slots in your day, it doesn't have to be 2 consecutive hours. Consider asking to put your activities on hiatus or finding someone to delegate your tasks to. So, now that that's out of the way, I feel that NaNoWriMo offers the perfect amount of time to complete 50,000 words, while also holding down a full-time job and a household. I have a plan. It's a three-pronged plan, and I call it trifling. Writing can be laborious. We break our brains against finding the right word. Many people can't handle such granular details. By planning out every last trifling detail, there's no chance to fall into a plot hole and stay stuck. So, what I'm about to tell you is going to require some In essence, the trifling method involves preparing 3 outlines. The first outline is broad brushstrokes, and that's the overall beginning, middle, end of your story. Then you make another outline at the scene level. This will be a longer outline than the first one you made. And then once you've got your scenes done, you're going to make a very long outline with action beats as granular as possible, down to the smallest fractal. So, for step 1, broad brushstrokes. Pick a high-level structure, any high-level structure you like. There's so many out there. You could do, for example, and this is not an exhaustive list, you could do the hero's journey, the W shape, Larry Brooks method, Save the Cat. That's really good for novel writing. Also, the story grid's foolscap method. In fact, part of my foolproof plan involves at some point logging your scenes into the story grid, which is free. So step 2 is a scene level outline. Make sure that when you're outlining your scenes that you begin and end them on opposite notes. And if you're unfamiliar with the story grid, I highly recommend that you go to the website, sign up, and get the free material there. There's also, I think, a 5-part series here on YouTube that pretty much explains the whole method. I'm not asking that you follow every step of it. It's just the grid itself is a requirement for my method, unless somehow you can keep that in your head without writing it down. So the reason I suggest using the story grid for the scenes is so you can track polarity shifts. No matter which structure you're using, you could apply the hero's journey into the story grid. And polarity shifts essentially means that if a scene begins with a character having the best day of his life, it needs to end with him having the worst day of his life. That's how we're wired to receive and consume stories. Also, another really good thing that the story grid offers is there's a column for timestamping your scenes, and this is so important because if you fail to mark down what time of day something happens or how many days have passed, you will be very angry with yourself when you have to go back and instead of looking it up somewhere, you have to read your entire novel to find out how many days have passed. That's no fun. Step 3 is granular action beats. This is very detailed, and this is also the secret to your success. If your scene is the waiter punches Jimmy in the face, what you're doing when you're writing down your scenes is you're trying to capture a snapshot in time, not using necessarily articles of speech, but you're trying to portray the main thing that happens in your scene. But that's not really an outline. You leave out so much of it. You leave out the sensory details, you leave out the emotional response, you leave out actions and reactions, and everybody knows, or most writers know, that there's probably like 6 parts to a scene. So anyhow, if you don't pre-plan how that scene's gonna unfold, you will get stuck, and you might even stop writing in the middle of November, which would be a tragedy. So outlining every last detail will prevent writer's block. And don't worry about creative inspiration. If you feel like this is stifling you, it won't. It will not, I promise you. You will find, once you experience it, that there are still places to embellish and to be creative once you dive into it. So for the granular outline, for this one scene of punching Jimmy in the face, here's an example of how the granular beats would go. So for this one scene, I've listed out 10 action beats. You could list out 100. At least try to have 6 for each scene. So, beat number 1. Jimmy drives to the pizza place, hungry for a savory delight. Number 2. The place is nearly empty and smells like bread. Notice that sensory detail. Number 3. Jimmy feels more hungry, salivates, so he's reacting. Number 4. At the counter, Jimmy orders a euro, but really wants a pizza. Number 5. Jimmy never takes what he wants. That's some deep point of view. Number 6. Jimmy sits in a booth to wait. Number 7. A waiter bounds toward him, grabs him, pulls him from the booth. Number 8. Jimmy doesn't know the guy and struggles. So there's his reaction, or his response. Number 9. The waiter says, "You kissed my wife," and punches him in the face. Number 10. Jimmy reels. He hasn't kissed a woman in 3 years, and certainly not anyone's wife. So you see how there's a polarity shift there. Not a particularly artful one, but the scene opens where he is hopeful and looking forward to a nice supper, and then it ends with him getting punched in the face. So anyhow, the trick to making this granular outline is to be specific and inartful. That's one of the beauties of NaNoWriMo, is you're not expected to write a good book. And with outlining, if you're inartful, that's going to still give you the creative fuel you need to get through it, because then you can apply the art to writing your story. An outline is part of the writing process, but it's not the same as hard writing. And you'll find this to be true once you start. Putting everything down in specific beats allows you to pick up where you left off without wondering how you should transition or what step you skipped in the outline. It will save you a lot of staring into space when really you just want to keep writing. So, be as trifling as you can. If you think you've got as granular as you can, let go of your inner censor and play around. Be more trifling with your level of details. Include sensory details. For every action, show your character's emotional response rather than tell it. And this is very difficult. Thomas Mann said writers are people for whom writing is more difficult than most people. And this part of it could actually take a long time in the planning. If you haven't begun your outline yet for the month of November, I suggest that you start tonight. You have to invest time in the pre-writing process. Dedicate quiet time to think through all three of the outlines. Because it's not like you're just gonna go to your desk and start writing and it's just gonna come to you. There will be moments that you have to put one hand on the desk and another hand in the air, just like Joyce Carol Oates said, and try to be a conduit for the muse. Anyhow, I'm just saying, it's gonna take time. Thinking takes time. Once you have the three roadmaps, you'll have more fun when the hard writing begins. And a word on resistance: try not to allow the trifling to get in the way of your novel. Stick to the plot. Proustian questionnaires are the bad kind of trifling. Who cares what your protagonist likes for breakfast? Unless you can develop full-blown dossiers on your character and complete all three outlines by November 1st, don't sweat the small stuff. And also, look within yourself and ask, like, if you've spent 5 days writing out what your main character wears in the morning or what's in his drawer, his junk drawer, just like, who's that guy, the Irishman? Oh, James Joyce. Then ask yourself, is this really important to my story, or am I resisting actually getting deeper into the story? Okay, so what I have presented to you is a plot-driven story. Some may say that there's no character development in this method, but you will find character-driven sequences once you know what your story is about. You've got to do that first high-level outline, or else you're going nowhere. You'd be wandering aimlessly, and nobody wants to read a story like that. You need a clear dramatic question from the start, and you need to have some idea of how it's going to end up. Otherwise, why write? Is it just because you feel like writing something, or do you have something to say? It's more important to know your plot than to know the backstory of every minor character, and that also relates to resistance. That said, do use archetypes and character tools to flesh out your plot in the planning stages. In fact, the two are intricately linked. The way your story resolves is going to depend on your main character's archetypes. Their stumbling blocks become their stepping stones. What is it in their personality that is weak that they will use to become strong? And of course, how does that relate to the message of your story overall? By the way, I think I skipped it. My favorite type of high-level outline is the moral premise by Dr. Stanley D. Williams. I highly recommend that one. And the reason I recommend that is it is intricately tied to the theme. So every single different plot development relates back to the lesson of your story. It's very good. And also, improve your craft year-round. Trifling, this method of finishing a novel in 30 days, is a get-it-done approach. There's much to learn about the craft. Don't let your writing practice languish in the off months. So to review, you'll be making 3 outlines. 1 high-level outline with turning points and milestones, 1 scene-level outline with dilemmas, goals, conflicts, and disasters, 1 action beat outline with granular details, every little action from face palms to moonlight glinting off rain-soaked trash bags. And I also have a bonus step for you. If you follow all 3 steps, you will complete 50,000 words in November without losing momentum. If you want your novel to come out well, do this extra step. After listing out the final outline, the granular level outline, take the first high-level outline and with a highlighter, analog or digital, mark every high-level point from the first outline into the draft of the third. So you'll be working with 2 manuscripts and you'll go from one to the other and set your opening image, whatever first milestone is, find it in your granular outline, the one with the most pages, and mark that first milestone with your highlighter. and then continue. You may use these points to keep yourself on track as you write, which is always good, and these high level points make very good chapter separators, unless you're the type of writer who separates every scene as a chapter, which is fine. That's the beauty of NaNoWriMo. It doesn't matter what kind of book you write, whatever genre it is, whatever market you're going for, a novel is a novel. Just write 50,000 words. And so once you have all three of your outlines, try not to leave home without it, especially the third outline. Take your list of beats, and by the way, there could be anywhere from 50 to 5,000 beats on your third outline, along with the highlighted milestones, should you choose to accept that challenge, and take it with you everywhere you go. Because what you're looking for is to write anytime you have a free moment. And if all you have is 10 minutes, for most of us, it takes us 10 minutes just to get going, just to think, oh, where was I? Where am I going? But if you've got that granular outline there, you can just start. You might even be able to do an entire scene in 10 minutes. And for you pantsers out there, don't worry. There's still room to surprise yourself, even with a granular beat list. Go do it. Start trifling.